21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
So what inspired me to get involved in this industry? Well, I studied as a software engineer for many years. And when you work as a software engineer, especially in that industry, I think a lot of people will look for what is the leading edge of our industries? What is the bleeding edge? Where is new technology being pushed forward? And in software engineering, I think it's really, at the moment, for the last 10 years, probably, it's been one of two areas. It's been on artificial intelligence or it's been on blockchain. Those are the two kind of main growth areas ahead of us. And artificial intelligence requires a bit of a PhD. It's a bit arcane, but blockchain is a bit more accessible once you understand the constraints that you have to live by. It's a completely new technology. It requires a different approach to how you do things from a traditional software engineering world. But those constraints, they present an opportunity once you kind of understand why you have to live by those. And it's an opportunity to kind of rebuild what we already have, but in a completely different way.
So what is a blockchain?
Yeah, so blockchain really just focuses on the storage format of data. That is purely what blockchain is. It's really a question of what can you do with the storage format. So this storage format is decentralized. That's a word you always hear. It's decentralized in a way that you and I, Martin, we don't really know each other that well. We're operating on different sides of the world, but we can both have a copy of the storage and both be in perfect agreement that the storage that we both have is the same. We can agree that what's happened has happened, right? We can agree on that. And there's rules you codify into a blockchain around how you add new data to the system that forces you and I to agree that that has happened. Now, Bitcoin is the most famous implementation of blockchain. Equating Bitcoin and blockchain is like equating internet banking and the internet, right? One's a technology, one's an application, okay? But when we look at when I go back to what I said around, it's an approach to life. It's a different perspective on how you operate around these things. We kind of categorize the internet into three different phases. We have Web 1, which was this kind of 90s, early 2000s, or probably all the way through the 2000s, where you go on the internet and you consume content that the website owner has created for you. So it's like a news website. Okay, that's Web 1. Web 2 is user-generated content. So this is a rise of social media, the rise of content sharing platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of these platforms where average users will create and publish content, and the system will communicate that content to the rest of the ecosystem. Web 2 is amazing. People spend hours every day on the internet consuming content that every average other people have done. But the problem with Web 2 that we've all kind of realized, and this has become very apparent over the last 5 years, is that these big faceless, nameless systems that are giving us content have been maximizing the monetization of this. They've been serving us up stuff that will entice us into anger or rage. They've been serving us up content that will push us further and further away into our bubbles. And they've been pushing our kids some crap. So we're looking at this Web 2 and thinking this isn't quite working. And that's what Web 3 is kind of designed. One of the ways Web 3 is designed to solve this is by making it so the systems that control the internet, that operate behind the internet, whether it's a content sharing platform, whether it's an art or sale distribution platform, all of the rules in those systems are completely transparent. So Web 3 is really just about making things fairer, more equitable, and more transparent. Now, the way that we do that is with blockchain. So blockchain is a technology where you and I have to both agree that something's happened. And for all of that to happen, we have to both understand and agree that the rules in place for how that happens are known by all, okay? The rules of how content is shown to other people is known by all. The rules around how our tickets or our NFTs are managed is known by all. So Web3 is about making the system all these like software systems that run our internet, that run our life these days, a lot more transparent, a lot more open, a lot more equitable.
Before we go to the question, what problem does your system SubQuery, solve? Let's continue with you. What motivates you to keep building that kind of innovative platform?
Well, part of it is the excitement of doing something in a quite new technology space, right? Is actually doing something quite new. We are building a new tool that radically rethinks how we. So before I'll come into SubQuery, but so that part of that's that. Another aspect of it for me is that, I do believe that we've kind of got to a bit of a bad situation right now with how the internet operates. I do, firmly believe that, I was lucky enough to grow up before the age of social media, but I kind of worry about kids that do right now. For some children, it's everything they've ever known and the world that will known. Hopefully not, but that might be the case. And so I think there's some pretty bad societal impacts that will come up if we just kind of keep feeding kids with information. It's kind of like feeding them with cocaine, because these systems kind of do that. So I think we need a lot more thinking about how we can create alternative systems that are both still engaging, but a bit more positive. I also believe that there are some massive corporations that have really kind of dominated the space across the internet and different things, right? If you buy a ticket for a concert or for an event, you're buying it through one of probably 3 different agencies, and they take huge fees, like ridiculous fees, and provide a pretty crap service, right? Like if I decide last minute I can't go to this concert, I can't really sell that ticket easily. I can't, it's not my ticket. Even though I bought it, I'm still kind of limited by this system that's kind of not fit for purpose. So I think there's a lot, partly of it's the new technology, but partly of it is because of what I perceive to see as huge inefficiencies in the system that shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be limited by these impacts or by these restrictions that these big corporations place on us.
Let's go more into that direction. So what else makes you passionate about, let's say, the blockchain industry?
It's transparency. It's also, everyone's kind of on an even footing, right? Like if you can read the code, which I guess does require a barrier to entry, but if you can read the code, it means that everything's kind of like public. It's open. You can see how it works, and some white hat hackers have done a really good job in blockchain, just spending time with the expertise on looking at code and figuring out what the vulnerabilities are. It's open, it's fair. There's an approach here. There's also a real tricky challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges for our industry right now is there's this new technology, which is really cool, but working out how we integrate that into the real world. I'm sure you'll agree with me, Martin, that blockchain, and many people will say that is a kind of a cool, neat solution looking for a problem. And even though there's people in the industry like myself that believe there are a lot of problems that are very clear, we haven't done a great job in making blockchain more accessible to the general public. It's still quite user hostile. So I've got a bit of a passion into that product management side of things, how you build systems and tools and applications that everyday people can use. And that's a huge challenge for us in blockchain, more so than other industries because of certain limitations, right? Like you have to have a private key that you should keep secret. And if you mess up, it's kind of like you can't really resolve that. So we have to, the amount of effort we have to put into user experience is a lot higher than what we're doing right now. And I think over the next 5 years, that's something that we'll focus towards. And I'm looking forward to that.
So blockchain was one challenge. What was your biggest challenge in launching?
Yeah, I'll start by sharing like, so what is SubQuery? So I work for a team called SubQuery. It's one of the biggest blockchain data providers out there in Web3. Now, problem for blockchain, and it's a real cool technology, but it's actually got one big drawdown. So blockchain is like a chain of blocks. It's in the name. But what that means in reality is you can kind of visualize that like a book. And like a book has pages, in a blockchain, every 10 seconds, a new block is written. Whatever's happened in the last 10 seconds, we save that to a block and we add that to the chain. Same thing like a book. The last 10 seconds, I record on that page what's happened and I flip to the next page. Now, if you've got a page full of information, let's say you've got your favorite book and you want to ask the book, what was the last 10 pages or what was the last 10 times that this character appeared in this book? And that's the same as like asking a blockchain, give me the last 10 transactions that I've made, or give me the last 10 interactions that I've made with the blockchain. It's in a format that everything's split over blocks or over pages. And so kind of in order to answer that question of, when did I last appear in this book, you have to kind of scroll through the pages and you have to scan them, like looking for this character's name, which is really inefficient, terribly inefficient. And that's one of the biggest drawdowns of blockchain. It's a great technology for storing data in a decentralized way, but it's a terrible method or storage system for retrieving and querying data. And that's what SubQuery is here to solve. So you take your book, and SubQuery is an open, flexible, universal, what we call data indexer. And a data indexer is a bit of software that you kind of like shape up, you code. So SubQuery, look at it as like a tool, and you tell SubQuery that I want to connect to this blockchain. I want to look for these types of events. And whenever this type of event happens, so this type of event could be related to your NFT platform, for example. Whenever that type of event happens, I want to take that data off the chain and I want to store it in this format. And essentially what it does is it stores it into a more traditional database, which we've spent 30 years optimizing. I'm sure you'll know from your days, databases, you can sort them, you can filter them, you can query them, you can do a lot more things. It maps this kind of linked list data into a relational database to which you can then query a lot more efficiently. And so essentially the outcome here is that people that are building applications on blockchain, whether that's a wallet, whether that's an NFT marketplace, whether that's an explorer, whether it's whatever, doesn't matter. Any application that needs data from a blockchain, there is a need for a tool like SubQuery, a tool that will take data off and provide it to the app more efficiently. Because with that, you can build more intuitive applications. You can build applications that show data that spans more than one block. You can show applications that show entire histories of things. You can build better platforms. And that goes back into my dream or my belief that for us as a blockchain industry to become more mainstream, we need better user experiences. And that's why we're building SubQuery. To allow people to build those. Now, one of the biggest challenges with coming to blockchain is there are actually quite a lot of blockchains. There's not just one Bitcoin blockchain. There's hundreds of blockchains, and each blockchain speaks a different language. And one thing that we focus on at SubQuery is creating a universal indexer, so we can connect to many different types of blockchains, and we're slowly moving through the ecosystem to add support for them all. And we can connect to many different types and take data off all of them. And so that last little bit of like translating this custom blockchain's random way of thinking into what we store data in a relational database, that's a bit of a tricky part. But that's a tech issue that we just have to solve.
Let's go to your organization. So data indexer, universal indexer. So they are pretty high goals. So you are high achievers and you did a lot. What's your organizational structure, and how do you make money? What's your business model?
Yeah, so like we've grown like hyper fast over the past 2 years, like medium blockchain, right? Like we've gone from like, I think 2 years ago, there was like 5 of us. And now there's like 30. So yeah, going for a lot of growth phase right now. The organizational structure is quite flat, intentionally so. The idea is that everyone knows what we're doing and everyone kind of shares in that view. In terms of revenue, so we build this software so it's open source. Everything in blockchain kind of needs to be open source. People in blockchain kind of have this open source belief. And so if you're building a closed source software, it's kind of a bit of a detrimental to your ability to kind of get people to use it, because they're not quite sure how it works or who owns it or what's happening, right? It's a little bit opaque. So the software itself is open source. People can run that themselves. It's completely free. But we have a managed service. So people will use SubQuery to build their own data pipeline for their own application. And we have hundreds and hundreds of customers out there that use this. But running infrastructure is the last possible thing that you want to do, Martin. I don't know if you've ever run any infrastructure, but it's a pain in the ass. You have to assume it's going to break, and you have to assume that you're going to get a phone call at 2 a.m. to fix it. So we run large scale infrastructure for our customers. So they give us their project and we run it in our managed service. And we've got this huge service that's got hundreds of projects on it, thousands of registered users, and it's got doing like hundreds of millions of API requests per day. So big scale. And there's we obviously charge to run and look after these projects, and that helps us fund the development of the core product. But we are working on building a decentralized version. So one of the biggest challenges is blockchain, and it's kind of a bit of a shady secret, is that a lot of the core infrastructure solutions, including SubQuery, but many other things, a lot of the core pieces actually are still quite centralized. So if you're relying on a third party to provide access to blockchains, that might be centralized. SubQuery itself today is centralized, so that we run these projects. If you're running it with us, then if we go down, then your application probably goes down, okay? And that's one of the big challenges with this decentralized vision, and we're still relying on centralized services. It's a bit strange, okay? So we are actively working on right now decentralizing our product. And what that means is that you have this SubQuery project that you've defined and you can run. You give it to us to run, but you can also give it to anyone out there in the world to run. And anyone can run it on their own computer. They can start serving data up. And we're building a decentralized network where they will be rewarded for running these projects. So you can ask the network or the system, can someone please give me this data from this project? And any one of 3 or 4 people out in the world that have indexed that data, that have that available, can serve that to you. The system will direct you to the closest available, best reliable provider, and they will give you that data and they'll be rewarded for doing that. So you're kind of building a data marketplace here. And the view here is that there's no one party. Well, there could be one party doing indexing, but generally speaking, we allow for more than one party. And you can decentralize, reduce the risk of one person going down, bringing your entire application down. That's the network in a nutshell.
What are the most important takeaways, your personal transformation?
Yeah, well, it's been a wild ride for the past 2.5 years. I came from a corporate before this, and I kind of forget about, like every 5 years, I forget how much I hate working in a corporate. And I make the mistake of going back for about 6 to 8 months and realizing that corporates are really nice and comfortable, but they're like a cruise ship, you know? Turning a cruise ship is just really, really difficult. Once it kind of goes in the right direction, it can speed off quite quickly, but turning something takes years, and that's far too long for my liking. So I worked in a corporate, but now I kind of jumped back into the startup world, and blockchain is the most scrappiest of startups, right? I worked in normal traditional startups before. Blockchain, everything happens at twice the speed. What I've learned though, and I think this is critically important for anyone that wants to jump into this space, but I think it's also relevant to traditional startups, is that if you want to be involved in an early stage company, you can't be afraid of rolling your sleeves up and just getting stuck in. Like the most toxic thing that someone could say in a startup is, that's not my job. You know, like it might not be your job, but it's all of our problems together, and we've got to work together to solve it. So one thing I do really enjoy personally is that crisis mode kind of situation where you just have to kind of all get in there and sort it out. And I don't think that anyone, everyone is valued in that situation. And the more that you kind of give back and at least try to understand and try to kind of provide any feedback or advice or get involved, that's really helpful. So it's been hard for us as we've grown, and we're now formally in like a scale up size, right? So we're now like 25, 30 people in SubQuery. As we've grown through this phase, finding people that still maintain that like, it's scrappy, you got to get stuck in when you need to. That's a kind of a different approach to work that you only find in startups, and it's quite refreshing when you're working with people like that. When you're working with people like that, it's really, you come every day and like you just get shit done. But when you're working in a corporate, you don't have that mindset. This is my job and this is what I do 9 to 5, and I'm going home at 5:01 p.m. So finding people as we've grown that still maintain that philosophy is pretty tricky, but they're still out there. The challenge is how you motivate them. And then that kind of brings me to my second thing. One thing I've learned a lot with scale ups now, especially, is as you get bigger and bigger, communication becomes the biggest challenge now. It's not, I could get in there and do a lot of the stuff. My colleagues get in there and kind of, we could do it all. We can do it. There's no reason why we couldn't do it. But the time management is a big constraint here. Okay, you've got 30 people all working. The communication effort of making sure that 30 people are working in unison and working to the same direction and are all on the same page, and there's no confusion, and everyone is driving towards a shared goal. There's more communication you'd ever think there needs to be. So understanding how to communicate and how to clearly define goals and define direction, that's a new challenge, and that's been a new kind of learning over the past year, is how we help to push people in one direction, all together in unison, making sure that everyone's on the same page. So those two things have been the biggest kind of growth for me personally. And it's been interesting learning about that, making some mistakes along the way, but everyone does that, right? It's the best way to learn.
Two questions. First question, what kind of project management system are you using? And the second question, what kind of crisis management do you have?
We've got two teams, and one team is kind of playing with a little bit of Scrum, like the standard kind of Scrum approach, and the other team is just kind of keep it a bit more loose, agile. What we've realized is that we do need to spend more time. It is that time you spend planning work is actually quite critically important. Designing upfront, like we're UX designers that work on new features. There's a common calculation or kind of heuristic where if you solve problems in the design phase, it's worth like 1/10 cost of solving it at the testing phase, right? The cost of change or cost of resolving an issue increases kind of almost like exponentially throughout the development progress of that change. So one thing that people always like cut, when you're too busy, you always cut it down here, but people cut that design and that definition. And that's one thing that we've made the mistake of doing in the past, but I've learned that is critically important, is making sure that we design things right. We understand the pitfalls. We've kind of answered the questions. Like all the developers had a look at it and been able to say like, well, that might have to change because we don't have that here, or we can't get that in this way. But having that kind of discussion before people start coding, before people start putting code in the code base is quite important for efficiency. In terms of crisis management, I love crisis management. It's a terrible thing to have a crisis, but it's also quite an exhilarating time. For us, we run pretty critical infrastructure, right? So we are aiming for 4 nines of uptime. 4 nines of uptime means 15 minutes or 51 minutes down per year. It's like one bad meeting. And And for us, that means a lot of redundancy, but also as soon as something breaks, as soon as something is looking bad, there is like, we have to kind of all swarm on it. Okay. So we have a few things. Whenever something goes wrong, we create a dedicated Slack channel for it. Okay. Everyone that gets in it is in that Slack channel, and it's clear what's going on, what's happening. Okay. All the conversation is in there. One thing that we're setting up is if there's a crisis or if there's an incident, there is an owner. Okay. There's one person that is assigned ownership of that incident. Okay. And at any time you want to ask what the status is, they've got to know. Anytime you need to kind of, they need to orchestrate something, they're the one that's kind of assigning it out. Right. So there's a single point, you don't have like multiple chefs in the kitchen kind of trying to get everyone to do different things, right? You have one person that's kind of funneling it out. So combination of having everyone in a shared kind of area to talk about this and just talk about this, having one owner of the incident, and also proactively, obviously, like, we can be proactive around avoiding these issues happening in the first place, but I'm assuming they do. Assume issues will always happen. So you have to kind of operate like that. Then I think the third biggest challenge is, how do you act after it's happening? So your system's gone down, it's been down for 2 hours. How do you react as a company to tell your customers that went down? How do you apologize to them? How do you do the reputational stuff? And for us, it's about, by the next day. So we solve the issue, and the next day, by the latest, we will write a formal incident report and we will share that with our customers. This is what happened. This is what went wrong. This is what we're doing to prevent it to ever happen again. This is how we're learning from it. And I think customers, obviously they don't want their systems to go down, but when you kind of show to them that you're actually taking serious steps to prevent that from happening again, they understand. People understand. People realize that mistakes happen, unforeseen incidents happen. It's a way of life. But the question is not what you do when it happens. It's how you kind of move on from after it, how you learn from it. And the number one rule, Martin, is never blame anyone. Never blame. Someone made a bad mistake on the configuration. Okay, well, that was a process issue, right? How should we have set up process so that as soon as that happened, we could have monitored it and seen it happening and resolved that before it kind of became a P1. Someone accidentally turned off an entire system accidentally. Well, probably that should have been on a formal, kind of notice that the system's critical, and there should have been a process around upgrading that or terminating it, that kind of stuff. So never blame an individual, blame the system.
Your communication or relationship with customers.
We've got an interesting situation where we're kind of a combination of B2B and B2C at the same time, right? We have customers that are small individuals hacking away in their home, working on the next project themselves, right? But we also have very large customers that run, a huge landscape of different indexes for their products, right? So we have the whole spectrum. It is a tricky question how you balance those, right? Because you always have that, there's this 80-20 rule that pervades everything, right? 80% of your customers are 20% of your revenue, and the 20% of your customers are 80% of your revenue. That's kind of common. It happens. So for us, we got this challenge of, okay, well, we could focus on those 20% that are a majority of our revenue and just kind of work with them. And we do have very white glove service for them. But we also can't lose sight of the 80% of the customers that are a lot smaller the revenue, but could grow to become some more of those 20%, right? So you got to kind of grow both sides of that equation at the same time. For us, this means when you have large B2C customers, it's all about documentation. So for us, it's a developer tool. Developer relations is quite important. That means tutorials, documentation, workshops, constantly thinking, how do we make this easier for the person that has never seen the service before to get started in the first 15 minutes? How do we make it so easy that they understand it? They kind of go to the website and click, oh, this is how it's done, boom, boom, boom. And that's a never-ending battle with documentation. It never finishes. Documentation is never done. It's the most thankless, punishing job, but it's also one of the most critical. So, right, if you don't have good documentation, people won't, or good onboarding kind of processes for new customers, you can't assume people are going to use it. And when you start get big like us, you can't also like handhold everyone through it. When you're small, you can kind of like handhold people and say, okay, we'll help you build the first part. We'll implement it for you. And you can take it from there. When you get big, you can't do that anymore. On the big side of the customers, it's really about giving them a tool or format where they feel like they are special. They can, if a big customer of ours messages us, they know that they can get a response either that business day or the first thing the next one, right? We're international companies, so making sure that they feel heard, and they know that we're going to get back to them ASAP. So when we have hundreds of customers like we do, keeping track of all these requests is quite tricky. We're working on different processes around that. But those are the two kind of constraints that you have to operate when you're kind of serving both sides of that market. For big customers, it's about being perceived to be responsive and kind of there. And that's part of, I'm from New Zealand. I think it's part of our culture here is that we will be quite open and close. We want to be like friends with our customers rather than professional customer relationships, right? Like, I think it's from my culture, it's quite good to kind of, joke and treat people as colleagues and friends. So you see that in our communication style, you see that in our support style, where we're kind of a bit more closer. And I think people enjoy that. There's no point being a formal kind of like, don't start by setting up like a support desk where like you get like your message is, in the support queue, wait to hear back from your customer service representative in 4 days. So, oh, great. I feel special then. So having a bit of a human touch is quite important. And that's one weird thing about Martin, about blockchain actually is in this space, we use a lot of like instant chat messages, instant messaging applications. And as a result, and blockchain, you're never really that far away from someone else. Like within a few hours, I can get introduction to any other team in the ecosystem. I can probably get an introduction to their CEO if I have the right ask, right? And I can message them and I can just be in a chat with them. I don't have to send an email across the void. I can get someone to introduce me and I can start immediately exchanging chat messages. And one of the downsides is I wake up in the morning to hundreds of chat messages from different people, different customers, different people that want to get in touch with me because it's open. But the upside is that if I do have a question, if I do want to spitball something or share an idea, you're just one chat message away. It's quite relieving when you, especially come from a corporate environment where if you want to talk to customers, you have to go through like a customer service representative, and then you go to their customer service representative or partner kind of member, and then you finally get to the customer within that customer, the actual user. And there's like 4 layers of Chinese whispers between you and them. But in blockchain, it's like, cool, if I want to hop on a call with the developers that are using it, I can okay that and get them involved and learn a lot straight away.
James, in 5 years?
In 5 years, I believe that we will have figured out a blockchain is the way to go if it's a bit of a not quite going to be the solution that we're looking for. And I certainly hope it's the former, it's the way to go. In 5 years, if that's the case, we're going to start seeing applications, or I believe and I hope that we're starting to see applications where you can use it, but you don't know it's on a blockchain. You don't know it uses blockchain technology. That's opaque. At the moment, it's painfully obvious that you're using a blockchain application because it's kind of difficult to use and it's a bit risky. But in 5 years' time, it should be as easy and as simple that my parents can use it without knowing. In 5 years, I hope that blockchain is going to be universal. It's going to be integrated into different systems. We've got all these alternatives that are cheaper, faster, more performant, more efficient to these legacy platforms. In 5 years, it's going to become a lot more mainstream. And in 5 years, if that's the case, in 5 years, that means SubQuery is going to be a core part of that. I mean, SubQuery is going to be a core piece of that infrastructure stack to provide data to these applications. And it means that we're going to have to be efficient, fast. We're going to have to support all these different blockchains. We're going to have a really strong onboarding process so that new developers can get on board really quickly. We're going to have a huge managed service. We're going to have a decentralized network with millions of participants powering all these applications. It means that we need to scale as a team. We need to scale as a company. And I, of course, need to scale myself. So that's my hope for 5 years. We are currently running a test network for our SubQuery network. If you're curious to see how blockchain works, like how does, I've told you what SubQuery is, and now you might want to be curious, so how are you going to run this in a decentralized way? Go to our website and look at our test network. See what it's like, read the white paper, figure out how, try to understand our solution. If you're building a blockchain application, if you want to build one, reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on our company's Discord, on Telegram even, and put your ideas in, and we can certainly help you build that next application. But it depends on who you are. There's a lot of stuff out there. I'm just kind of keen to share more about what blockchain is and what we're trying to achieve as an industry together.
"21st Century Entrepreneurship" with Martin Piskarik.